So I think it's really the first step to creation is really getting that sample back. And I think it's exciting for the clients as well, finally getting to have their product in hand. Sure. That is it's a big first step. So while sometimes it's a little bit scary getting that first sample, it is a lot of fun. And it's just, it's the first step to getting to market is getting that sample. So
we help people with ideas, get them to revenue.
Hello, welcome back to episode 6 of season 2 of 52Launch podcast. I'm Jalen. I'm the marketing specialist here at 52Launch, and I'm joined with Mike and Josh. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi there. I'm Mike. I'm an industrial designer here at 52Launch.
And I'm Josh. I am also an industrial designer.
Today we're going to be discussing what is industrial design, and we'll be breaking down 3 topics within that realm.
Cool. So as industrial designers, a lot of people don't know quite what we do. So we'll kind of start there. An industrial designer's responsibility is to design products and experiences. So that's kind of where we come in. In regards to products, it's aesthetic, functionality, as well as manufacturability.
Yeah, and I'd say it's kind of design as a whole is kind of breaking out into all these different little subsets. You have UI, UX designers, which now is very digital, kind of designing app interfaces, how you move through those. And I think the word designer kind of gets like thrown around because there's so many different assets, but industrial design at its core is learning the process of which you solve a problem. And I think that's really what we do here on a day-to-day basis. We get a lot of different projects from all sorts of industries, and really at the end of the day, it's finding that core problem and coming up with solutions of how we can solve this in the most affordable and effective way possible.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of good products start with a prototype, even if it's a loose breadboard or sketch. And basically our role is to take the idea, the seed, and turn it into a fully fledged design. So a lot of times we'll take into account aesthetics. A good product needs to be aesthetically pleasing, so it's desirable on a shelf or online. Ergonomics are incredibly important too. Are there grips, or even how is it interfacing in your day-to-day life? How are you engaging with this object?
Yeah, I'd say to that point, kind of the relationship between the user and the product is a lot more important than I think people believe, because you interact with products every day, all the time. And you kind of draw towards the product that you like being with the most, whether that's just the way that you handle it, the way it feels, that whole experience is really important. So kind of really valuing not only the function, but the form and how that relates and creates a bond between consumer and product, I think is really important. So as industrial designers, it's really our main goal is for you to see it and be, I like that, for you to hold it and think, I like that. And then actually the function is something that's beneficial to your life. So it's really all-encompassing how you see and interact with products. It's a whole experience that you want to design and curate to really solve that problem. And I think for us, we get most excited, and the best products come from real problems. And I think we found through all the clients we've had that the best outcome comes from products searching for a solution, other way around, is a problem searching for a solution. So when you find a real hole in your day-to-day life, and you think this is an issue that I wish there was a solution for, kind of tackling that problem and falling in love with the problem is kind of a term that gets thrown around in industrial design. That's really where the great products come from.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, as a designer, you need to fall in love with the problem. And what that means is looking at it from the point of view of the person experiencing that problem, of your end user. So what are some trials and tribulations they might go through as they're facing this problem? Put yourself really in their shoes and think about it from all angles. And I think from that, you can have a lot of findings as to what will inform the product versus, like you said, the other way around. It's really important that we're developing and designing products that are solving problems and making people's lives just a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think, Mike, you've talked about this, is designing for the outliers and for the extreme outliers. So if you are designing a product targeted for someone who, you know, is not able-bodied or has a disability, it's going to create a product that's very targeted to that person, but usually the outcome is it creates a product that's really good for everybody because it's so targeted and the use case is so extreme. When you design for those extremes, it kind of just creates a really all-encompassing product that, you know, has a use case far greater than the intended target user.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I think, you know, the classic example of that is OXO, with the founder's wife had arthritis and she would have tons of issues with vegetable peelers. And so he developed a vegetable peeler with a handle that was much more ergonomic and comfortable, someone with limited mobility in their hands because she had arthritis. And what that led to was a product with a handle that wasn't just good for someone with arthritis, but folks who don't have arthritis, is still a very comfortable handle. So yeah, designing at the extremes and at the limits will often yield a really desirable
and
product.
It's funny how you've seen, you know, that came up for, was it a can opener? Or was it a potato peeler? It started for just one product, the OXO Good Grips, but then they broke it out into a whole product line. Absolutely. Now they have Good Grips that, you know, they have dishwashing utensils with Good Grips. They have the can opener Good Grips. They have the peelers. They have, you know, a whole line. So it's really funny when you kind of come out with an idea for a product or you have this problem, it can kind of go off in different directions. And I think that's kind of how the design process works. It's never linear. It's always, I have this problem. This is the first solution, I think. This is where I'm going to design into. And then you realize, oh no, there's this issue here. There's this issue here. I'm going to recircle back to the problem, investigate again. And then it leads you in a different direction. So I think there's very few times when you come out with an idea that actually solves that first try. It kind of takes all these different paths. And I think that's really helpful. If you kind of just get locked into the first idea and let that drive the design, it doesn't always work out best. I don't think you can force a design through. It has to really be living and breathing and adapting to all the things that you find out. And that's why we do a lot of sampling here. So we'll get our first prototype back, really test it and make sure that it's working great. But we're kind of hoping that it doesn't work great first time because finding those issues is really what improves the product.
So true. Yeah, there are often really, really wonderful breakthroughs in the flaws. But I guess before we start talking about sampling, so obviously as a designer, we need to design empathetically. We need to keep the user in mind. And we create beautiful designs. But once that's ready and we're ready to move to the next step, which would be, quite frankly, taking these designs and getting them ready for mass production, there are also a lot of considerations that go into that. So designing a highly functional object is one thing, but designing it in such a way that it can be produced at scale is another thing. So there are tons of considerations we take into account when we do this. Some of them being materials, some of them being manufactured processes, some of them being the manufacturer themselves. So which manufacturers could interface with this product best to create it. So yeah, Josh is right. Once we get to that point, we'll work with, we have a pretty large network of factories. So whoever fits the bill best, depending on what product it is, and we'll go ahead, get that first sample made, test it out. And yeah, we hope there are some problems with it, so we can work through those and have some better findings at that point too.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to the topic too of designing within constraints. I think at the onset, you can kind of look at constraints as negative, but I think kind of the scariest task is to design with no guide rails.
So true.
And have a prompt that's really vague and really open, because that's when you can kind of wander off into directions that lead you astray. When you have constraints and a set of guidelines that tells you what isn't possible, it can really direct what is possible. And that's when you can really get creative, I think, knowing what you can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, constraints always produce a much better product. Kind of finding the white space in between the lines and using the constraints to kind of bolster the design, I think is always really important.
And that's also in the sampling process, I feel like that also builds upon the constraints. You have an idea that you go out with, it gets made, it comes back, and you realize, oh, this solution I thought I had, once it goes through, reality, being manufactured and getting it in hand, you find out a new constraint that, guides it more. And it kind of just level upon level. You need rounds to design. You need all these different pathways to really flesh out a project and polish it to the level, it needs to be to get to market.
Absolutely.
So the process is very iterative. It's free flowing, and sometimes it gets a little frustrating because, you know, you want to work how you envision, but you really have to be able to roll the punches, and you have to get creative in how you problem solve, because there's always going to be new problems that you're not expecting.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the excitement can come from too. Just new findings through the sampling process. So yeah, we'll get an initial sample, we'll stress test it, function test it, everything. Oftentimes get one or two more samples, and at the point that we have something that is maybe partially handmade, maybe CNC, 3D printed, maybe we make a small tool to create this, we'll feel it's ready to move into the next phase, which would be tooling up and getting a fully as close to ready production sample as we can. So we often call these, especially if it's off an injection molding tool, our T1 samples. This would be the next evolution of the sample that looks very similar to what it might be in production. So it could be a few things wrong with it, but we are honing in on the final design, on the final product. So, and then again, we have that sample, we might move through a few more samples, and then at that point, you know, we've tested it, handed it off to a whole bunch of people. Everyone's had to spend time with it, understand it, and at that point, when everyone feels ready, we move into production.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks, the sampling process may seem scary doing multiple rounds, but that really is the time frame when you want to be identifying issues, because it ends up being a lot more costly if you go to production too early and, you know, you get something that you're not happy with. You want to find that out in the sampling phase. So doing a couple extra rounds of sampling is usually very effective, and it always results in a better product.
Yeah. Even if it costs a few extra weeks to just get one more shot at the sample, can really save you a lot of grief and heartache by the time you get to production. It's much easier to have one or two things you're not fully happy with than to have thousands. So we're always extremely diligent to make sure the samples are at a place that we're really happy with before our clients move into mass production.
And would you say that's like the most important part, or the part that you enjoyed the most, getting those samples back and testing them out, even if you have this gut feeling like this is not the final result, like you like seeing that come out?
Totally.
With it?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, Josh and myself personally really like the sketching phase at the beginning, just because it's a lot of fun. A lot of ideas are thrown around. But yeah, I mean, where the rubber hits the road is where you start getting the samples. You start having these things in your hands. Things can be beautiful on paper and even in CAD in the computer, but it's not until you hold them in your hands you can fully understand what is going on with the product. So yeah, very oftentimes you end up with something that you intended to go one way, and you have these realizations that maybe there are some drawbacks, or maybe you find out a functionality that you didn't know existed before that was only realized through making it physical.
Yeah. I will say, the sampling process is really fun. I think getting that first sample back is exciting because
It always is.
You sketch it, you bring it in the computer, you model it, you do pretty renderings, and but yeah, getting it in person and seeing it realized is very cool. So I think it's really the first step to creation, is really getting that sample back, and I think it's exciting for the clients as well. You know, finally getting to have their product in hand. That is it's a big first step. So while sometimes it's a little bit scary getting that first sample, it is a lot of fun, and it's just, you know, it's the first step to getting to market is getting that sample. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think another thing that's a bit of an artifact of the sampling process is being able to look at the entire scope of work from start to finish. So oftentimes our clients will come in with a very rough prototype, maybe something they cobbled together in their basement that works just a little bit, but the idea is there. And then taking that, sketching, figuring out the form and the aesthetics of it, building CAD models, and then having the lineage of every single sample. You can really see the evolution of the product from its inception all the way to the final product, which is always really fun, kind of interesting. Products can sometimes take a strange turn partway through, usually for the better if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But
and I think we can talk a little bit more on what our workflow looks like, kind of where our clients come in and that handoff, and then really the process. Like Mike said earlier, we have clients come to us with all varying stages of an idea. Some of it is just, you know, it's been in their head and they have it and they share it with us and you get really excited about it. Some people come in with a rough drawing, maybe a CAD model, or sometimes they even have, you know, made prototypes. So that can be all over the board, but really the process that we take for every client is we really sit for a while, think on their problem, their product, their idea, research it, get really familiar with it, and then we'll jump into sketching. And that's really a fun part, because that's really when there's no guidelines. We kind of start getting every idea, and kind of the saying we have is,
Mild to wild.
yes, mild to wild. What's the saying that I was thinking of?
Not that one? Well, we say mild to wild, where we have options that are very, very palatable.
Yeah.
So, something that's like right down the middle, use something you'd see at a department store. It's not super crazy. And wild is just that. And I think sketching on something everywhere in between really also gives us a good sense of where the client's attitude is towards this product. Like, do they want something that is a little bit more cut and dry, or are they interested in kind of searching and exploring some different possibilities for the product?
Yeah.
But sorry, Josh, I don't know what you're talking
So what I was going to say is you got to go past good. So to find out what good is, you got to go past it. So basically what that means is let your ideas go crazy, go mild to wild. And once you find something, you're like, oh yeah, that's not it, then you know what it has to be.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a funny way to get there, but you always want to go past good in that beginning phase. Finding out what a client doesn't like is just as good as finding out what they do like. And that first, after we go through our sketching phase, we'll have our first design review. And that's where we just show our clients all those mild to wild ideas.
Totally.
Yeah, that really gets a good gut check on what they're looking for, what we envision, what they envision. And the goal of that meeting is really just to align on what we're seeing. That meeting is really exciting. It's pretty exciting for the clients too. It's kind of, for someone that's the first time really having a visualization of their idea.
Yeah.
So whether that just be in sketching or in 3D, it's a pretty cool thing to get to share with the client. And from there, it's a really collaborative process. We get feedback from the clients. We kind of give what our recommendation for what we think it should be. And we are able to have our second design review, which, is tightening in on the concepts they like, and trying to really get to that finalized design. Jumping into 3D, doing it in computer, building a 3D model of what design they chose.
Yeah. And we'll sometimes make some relatively low fidelity samples in-house. We have a couple 3D printers. We have a small sample shop in the back. So depending on what the product is, we sometimes, even before, like we said, get to the sampling phase, we like to try to make something in-house. Those are always great explorations for ergonomics. If anything has a grip on it, it's so important. It's one of those things where, like, if you grab and hold on to it, if it feels good or not in the first second that you touch it. And that's also, like we were talking about earlier, the interaction between user and the product. If your first interaction is holding it and it doesn't feel well, doesn't matter how good the product is, you're going to have a bad time with it.
Yeah. And I think having the ability to prototype in-house quickly is very beneficial, because there's another saying, fail fast. That's, it saves money when you can print out something, find out it doesn't work, and then you get to go a different way. Instead of sending that through the sampling process where it has to go overseas, it comes back. And that's an expensive process. So if we're able to fail fast and ideate very quickly, it's very affordable and it's very efficient in the design process and getting to that best solution. Really being able to ideate quickly, print it out, feel it, understand it. It's a fun job to have, and it's really exciting every day to get to go through that process and walk the clients through along as well.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes the clients teach us things too. I think as a designer, obviously we use as much empathy as possible when put ourselves in someone else's shoes when we're designing. But I think oftentimes, you're only one person, or in this case, just the team, the two of us. You design something for every use case, and you hand it over to somebody, and they end up using or interacting with it in a way that's very, very different than you anticipated. I think there's great findings in that too.
Yeah, there's never a wrong way to do it. When you get a product, the way you use it is the way it's being used.
Absolutely.
And that is always an interesting finding. It's really eye-opening, and it shows you how hard it is to design something that's really impactful and works for everybody, because everyone's going to have a little different ritual when they use a product. So getting that user feedback is a huge, huge step in the design phase, because finding out those different interaction points, what someone's going to do with it that you didn't expect it, that's always very interesting and fun.
Yeah. We might have a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Do you want to chat about materials a little bit? Cool. So I think when people think about manufacturing and things like that, more often than not are like plastics and injection molding, which has its drawbacks and things like that. I mean, obviously we try to put as little plastic into the world as we can, but I also think something that's very interesting to me is just honesty in materials, and kind of what we mean when we talk about that is just using a material for its purpose. So I guess like at the most base level would be like having a piece of plastic and painting it to look like something else would be a very dishonest way to use materials. I think using materials for what they're really good for. So things like metals that are strong, maybe a little bit cold to the touch. So maybe you don't want to make a grip out of that, or rubbers that are a little bit softer to the touch, or like using something that's made out of wood and feels a little bit more sustainable, a little bit warm, exists in your home a little bit better. All these things are things that we keep in mind when we're developing products. And of course, as a designer, we're sensitive to the overall costs, right? Like if we're making something out of steel and wood, it's going to cost a lot more than making it out of plastic. But I also think as designers, we have a bit of a responsibility too. I think plastic can be a great material, and it can be used for really, really wonderful things if it's used correctly. So things that you intend to stick around for a long time, not be thrown out after a couple of uses, something that you want to last for a long time, I think is an okay use of plastic sometimes.
Yeah, and I think to that point, sustainability can kind of be looked through multiple lenses. I think to say plastic should never be used is not a great perspective. Like you said, it has its properties and it's really good at certain things. And being able to design a product that can be made once and used forever, if plastic is the material that allows that to happen, that's a very sustainable product. If it lasts, multiple lifetimes and outlives the consumer, and is always doing its job and doesn't have to be purchased by something else to replace its job, I think that's the ultimate goal of sustainability. So I think you never should avoid a material because it's not sustainable, because there's always use cases where it can be sustainable. I think it does get into, an unsustainable area when you're using a plastic for a single-use activity. That's always going to be unsustainable. So products that are able to be used over and over again and never, go away and always do their function, I think is the best way to view sustainability.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also think designing products for longevity. So, I mean, one way to look at it would be like, let's make the whole thing out of steel. Steel will last forever and it's really strong and hard wearing. And that's cool. Like that's totally an option. We've done products like that and they're awesome. Not always a possibility because of the costs and all those things. But I think also, if we are going to make something out of plastic, design it in such a way that if it does break, it can be repaired. So like, what does that mean? If it has a hinge on it, maybe the hinge is not integral to the entire thing. So maybe the hinge is not just a piece of plastic connected to the other piece of plastic. Maybe the hinge is actually a piece of metal. So like if it were to break at that fail point, you can replace it and breathe some more life into this product. Or just in general, building things that maybe screw together instead of permanently snap together, or not using adhesive to join pieces of plastic. That way that, after you're done with it, if you donate it or give it away to somebody else, if it does break down, someone's able to repair it and kind of keep this thing going for much longer. I think, call it like right to repair, but just building in the repairability into objects, I think is always a really important design consideration that is a great way to kind of incorporate sustainability into design.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, is that it?
I think that's all we have time for today.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was super cool and I learned a lot. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see highlights of this show or learn more about us at 52Launch or more about industrial design, be sure to check out the links below or find us at 52launch.com, and we'll be posting once a month, so stay tuned.
Thanks.
Thank you.